It all begins with the book of Genesis.
It might help my analysis if I knew what Genesis was, beyond the biblical reference.
Genesis is a Greek word that means the beginning. And this is a very appropriate title for this book, because not only is it the beginning of the Bible, but it also gives us a number of origin stories. Obviously, Genesis 1 and 2 is the beginning of the world. Genesis 3 is the beginning of sin. You can make the case that Genesis 12 is the beginning of Judaism, because it's the call of Abraham, who's the father of Judaism, and the formation of the covenant. By the end of the book of Genesis, you have the 12 tribes of Israel being born. The beginning of that. It is the beginning of the Torah. The Jews understand the Torah as being the law. These are the first 5 books of the Bible. The Greek for that, Pentateuch. If you remember, the Jews during Jesus' time believed that Moses wrote these first 5 books. When they refer to the Mosaic law or the books of Moses, they're talking about the Torah. And it all begins with Genesis.
It literally is Genesis.
For this unit that I'm calling Unit 1, Primeval History, the loss of original holiness, we're going to only focus on the first 11 chapters of Genesis, because the first 11 chapters of Genesis make up a special subcategory of books that we call primeval history. Primeval history is a fancy way of saying prehistory. History before there was history, before the recording of time. You won't find anything in Genesis 1 to 11 that deals with any other elements of history or any famous kings. You're going to have some geography mentioned, because the geography doesn't change a whole lot. Nothing you'll find in Genesis 1 to 11, which are 2 creation stories, the Adam and Eve fall from sin, the Cain killing Abel, the Noah's Ark story, and the Tower of Babel. You won't find information on this anywhere else in the world's literature except the scriptures. Primeval history. Now, something else that you need to know about Genesis 1 to 11 before we begin is that it is composed primarily of the literary genre called myth. Now, in today's understanding of the term myth, you probably associate it with that of a falsehood. That myth is the opposite of truth. Some people describe myth as something that people made up. You have that show Mythbusters. Mythbusters is trying to prove whether or not something is true or false. When it comes to literature, and scripture is a form of literature, that's not what myth means. Myth is not a falsehood. Myth is not synonymous with a lie. As a matter of fact, myth is the total opposite of that. Myth refers to the deepest of truths, the deepest of insights. Now, typically these truths revolve around the relationship between humanity and divinity. Myths are designed to express what it is that we can't fully explain. Myths are concerned with truth, and truth is concerned with meaning. This is not to be confused with history and science. History is concerned with facts.
Just the facts, man. Just the facts.
Myth is concerned with truth, truth is concerned with meaning, and history is concerned with facts. What am I saying in a roundabout kind of way?
I give up.
The contents of Genesis 1 to 11 are really about truth, not about history.
What is truth?
The contents of 1 to 11 is about meaning, not about facts. Now, did you know that Genesis 1 was written after Genesis 2 by about 500 or so years?
I had no idea.
The author of Genesis 1, who we call the priestly author, or P for short, didn't really care for the Genesis 2 creation story. So instead, he wrote us the Genesis 1 creation story, where God creates the earth in 6 days and then he rests on the 7th. He can get away with doing this because he knew that the contents of Genesis 1 to 11 didn't concern itself with history, didn't concern itself with science, it was concerning itself with meaning. And he was trying to express some truths in Genesis 1 that he felt Genesis 2 really didn't emphasize as much. And we'll get more on that in a very future episode.
I want it now!
If you believe that Genesis 1 to 11 is about history and is about science, in other words, if you're a biblical fundamentalist and you read the Bible literally, you kind of have a problem. Because the problem is we got two creation stories. And if you put those two side by side, we'll be doing this very, very soon. If you put those two side by side, you'll see that they're not the same. Did God create one day and then scratch it out and then create again? Or did he just kind of come up with the idea on one day and then Genesis 2, he changed his mind and did it a different way? Now, that's a problem. It's not a problem for me. It's not a problem for Catholics that interpret Genesis 1 to 11 as being about truth and meaning, not about history and facts. But I'm going to come down off my soapbox right now and emphasize more of what I'm trying to get at the very beginning of this course. And that when we read scriptures, both Old and New Testament, you have to pay attention to the figurative language and the literary genre that it was written in. Let me put this another way. When you pick up a newspaper, you don't read the comic strip page, the Sunday funnies, if you will, in the same way that you would read the front page. Okay, the front page news is usually more, obviously, factual based. It is reporting based on something that happened. When you go over to the Sunday funnies, who cares what Ziggy did? You're not going to approach those comics going, I wonder what happens. Oh, why did that happen to him? You know it's meant to be funny. That's called literary form. And the front page and the comic strips are two different literary forms. And the newspaper is also going to have obituaries, they're going to have advertisements, they're going to have pictures, they're going to have stock reports, they're going to have lottery numbers. The Bible's a lot like that too. The Bible's got all kinds of literary forms, and I hope you've learned this in a previous semester. But there's a lot of literary forms in the Bible that are not just narrative. You have history in narratives. You have historical people, historical places within the narrative. But you're going to have songs. You're going to have psalms, which are hymns that are sung. You're going to have genealogies. You're going to have lists. You're going to have eulogies. You're going to have fables. Jesus, of course, gives parables. Apocalyptic literature, that is symbolic literature about the end of the world. And in the case of Genesis 1 to 11, you're going to have myth.